Hello again. Once again, the thinking man's Ludo, and bullying off, we have Arthur Marshall.
Good evening. Very happy to find myself here once again with, on my left, Sue Cook. And on my right, Michael Jayston.
And Old Lofty, Frank Muir.
Thank you, good evening. And back again, of course, comes my team, who just won last week. On my right, writer Victoria Glendinning. And on my left, actor Timothy West.
Ring-a-ding-ding. First word comes up, Mammalija. That's the way I would pronounce it. Let me remind you that Arthur Marshall and his team will define Mammalija 3 different ways.
Easy.
2 are no good. 1 is right. That's the one that Franco tried to pick out.
Easy.
Mammalija, would you say, Arthur?
Mamaliga, actually.
Thank you.
Amongst the Creole Indians in the United States, the Mamaliga is an important figure because they go in, some of them, for voodoo worship. And the Mamaliga is a sort of mother figure. She is a priestess, a high priestess, who officiates at ceremonies, and her consort is, I need hardly say, a father figure, and he is called the Papa Liga.
There's Auntie Liga.
Shut up, Frank, this is something rather beautiful, don't spoil it.
Nunk Liga.
Yes. Let's hear now from Michael Jayston.
It's not quite as beautiful as that. Mamaliga is a contagious skin disease.
That's better.
Which was once caused by people who rolled cigars by hand. It was quite common in Cuba. Mamaliga causes a scaly coarsening of the skin between the fingers. And it's now known that the disease was caused by the spores in tobacco dust.
Right. Now it's Sue Cook.
Well, you might not know what Mamaliga is, but every single Romanian peasant certainly does, because it's their staple diet. It's a kind of porridge for them, made out of boiled maize. And for any Romanians who, rather like me, are left cold by porridge on its own, they can either add a little bit of milk or even some salted fish on best occasions. It's porridge.
So it's one of those jolly skin diseases that we seem to specialise in. It's a high priestess, and it's Romanian porridge. Frank, take your choice, sooner you than me.
It's obvious, isn't it? How do you spell porridge? Is it O-R-A-G-E? Or...
I think it's 2 W's in your case, isn't it?
There's a D. Oh, yes. How right you are. Mama... No, Mama Liga. Oh, no, Arthur. No. Sorry, old lad. Sorry, Chuck. It's not there. The skin disease is very interesting, as is the Romanian porridge, which it can't be. So therefore, I propose, and I'm sure we all agree, that we choose Sue Cook's Romanian porridge.
The Romanian porridge of Sue Cook. She said it was that. True or bluff, Sue? Well done, sir. Yes, you check. Yes, as you say. I mean, who had doubted it for a second that Mammalija or Liga was Romanian porridge? Swarry, I don't know. Frank?
Well, one of the hazards, I'm sure you know, of eating healthy bread made with stone ground flour is the bits of sand you get in your fillings, which is actually the bits of stone being rubbed off grinding stone. And swarry is to grinding stones roughly what sawdust is to timber. It's stuff which is rubbed off in the course of working. If you grind a tool on a grindstone, it leaves little bits of sandy bits which are called swarry. That's all. Next.
Jolly interesting, though. I mean, damn nearly scientific. Timothy, your go.
In old Cumbrian wrestling circles, Swarry is the name given to the area of ground, circular area of ground, exactly 22 feet in diameter, within which the combatants wrestle, and the object is to get the opponent's, any part of the opponent, over the edge of the swarry to touch the ground, and if you do that, you've won that particular round.
Victoria.
No, well, swarry is a regrettable anglicisation of the French word soirée, which, of course, as you know, means an evening party with conversation and refreshments, a nice little soirée. And it first was used in this English way, soirée, in Charles Dickens's time. And readers, lovers indeed of Charles Dickens, Arthur, may remember that Mr. Pickwick enjoyed, and I quote, he attended a friendly soirée consisting of boiled leg of mutton.
So then, they say that it's these stone particles that rub off when you're grinding your flour and that sort of thing. It's the area in which you wrestle in Cumbria, and it is a soirée. Arthur.
I think Frank's grinding stone bits mixed up with bread and all the rest of it. Isn't there a word slurry or something?
Yes.
Yes.
With a fringe on top.
Shut up. So, well, of course, it could be that. I haven't recently wrestled in Cumbria, so I can't talk about these Cumbrian wrestling circles. This thing about Mr. Pickwick and Swarry does ring a tremendous bell, a bell shared by the three of us. So, Victoria, we go for your corruption of soirée.
She did say a soirée was a soirée, yes. True or bluff, Victoria? Perfectly true. But I have to tell you, it wasn't Mr. Pickwick, it was Mr. Weller. He was being entertained by the footman in Bath. Another word I knew, and adds up to about 5 in a dozen years. 1-1. Dwile is the next word. Michael Jayston.
A dwile is a homely and rather unglamorous object to be found in any hygienically run East Anglian household. It is simply an East Anglian word for a damp cloth, which can be used to wipe off grease on a table or even the face of a grubby child. A dwile.
Let us now hear from Sue Cook.
Well, dwile is an art, really, that could easily be attributed to Frank and Arthur here, because it's a word meaning... It's a West Country word, and it means sly, crafty, gifted in intrigue, which, of course, you both are. And there is a somewhat obscure proverb in an equally obscure old handbook called Saws of Somerset, which Frank probably knows. But the saying is, as dwile as a dead pig, but not half so honest. It means... In fact, maybe Wiley came from that. Maybe it was Dwiley once and now it's Wiley, but I don't know. Anyway, it means sly.
What an impenetrable proverb.
Yes, yes, as many of them all often are. Let's hear from Arthur. What does he say?
Come with me to Wales, and if you see a gathering of more than a dozen people, or perhaps less than, say, 50 people, a smallish crowd, that in Welsh is a dwile. I don't know how many people there are in the Treorchy male voice choir, but I dare say that they would rate as a dwile.
It's supposedly, then, a crowd, well, in Wales, of course, a damp cloth in some other part of the country for wiping things down, and it means crafty or sly. Timothy?
Well, it's a tour around Great Britain, isn't it? I'm not very happy with Mike's damp cloth, I must say. The saying about the dead pig, I mean, if it isn't a real saying, it ought to be one. But on the other hand, we all feel that Dwile's relationship to Doyle, the Irish Parliament, might just be real, and that's the one we're going to go for, Arthur.
Yes, Arthur said, well, he didn't say much about Ireland, it was Wales, but, you know...
Well, shunted on
I
happily.
don't want to split hairs.
Chosen my dwile.
There you are. No. Not a thing, no. No, the dwile isn't the Doyle, it isn't a crowd in Wales, it's something else. Who gave the true definition of dwile? Here it comes. Yes. It is the damp cloth used in, well, you said hygienic households. I don't know, after you used it once or twice, wouldn't quite be there. However, Furison is the next word, and Timothy West defines it.
Well, the furison was the 16th century name given to the little hammer which worked on a flint in a tinderbox or in a flintlock pistol and caused the explosion. And there is an old military expression to fire with furison and flame, which is the only example that we can find of its use in everyday speech.
Well. Now, Victoria Glendinning.
No, it's older than the 16th century. Furison was a kind of feudal tax levied by the lord of the manor in medieval days. And it was what they had to do. The tenant farmers had to bring food for the lord's horses in the winter, anything like, dry food like oats or hay or, bean pods or anything like that. It was a medieval tax. Furison.
Right. Frank's go.
It goes back to ancient Greece. Furison was a chant chanted by the clergy of the Greek Orthodox Church. And it was called the Furison chant because it was the opening of the chant, which said the accent is approximate and the tune is not present at all.
That's a mercy.
But
Sorry. It was obviously a tense
surrounded by fans, so embarrassing. The chant goes, Furison aitha gnomin. And I need hardly remind you, Arthur, of your ancient Greek, and that means, hide me from the gospels of the wicked.
How you go on?
You're being a bit sly about whether you did know any ancient Greek. Well, we mustn't linger on that. I just wondered if you'd rise to
Only
it.
the one on holiday.
It's a chant. It's an old Greek chant. It is the flint hammer that strikes the spark, and it is a feudal levy. Oh. Michael, your choice.
Could be anybody, really. I rather like Victoria's feudal tax because it does sound rather French and it sounds as if it could be medieval. Frank's, I wish I knew ancient Greek.
So do I.
I mean, I know eleison, Kyrie eleison is the Greek words, but it sounds too near that. I'm going to go for the hammer on the tinderbox or pistol of
That
Tim's.
was Timothy West who said that, true or bluff? It's a bullseye. The furison was indeed the hammer, which, clanging down on whatever it clanged, I think the flint, produced a spark, or thereabouts. 3-1. We have the next word, which is axin, and who is it now? Yes, Sue.
Right, well, an axin is a geometrical term which could just possibly be beyond your comprehension. It is actually, let me quote it, it's the node, spelled N-O-D-E, of three curved lines where they can join in parallel. Now, I could elaborate, but it would take ages, and Robert would rub me on the knuckles with his ruler, so I'll go into it after the show if you like, but that's what it is.
I do hope it's not that.
Now let us hear from Arthur.
Axin is a now obsolete preposition, and it means in face of or opposed to. And there's an account written at the time of the Battle of Crecy, in which the Earl of Warwick did range his men at arms, axin, to the village of Waddicool.
Axing your pardon, ma'am.
Yes. Michael Jayston's turn now.
Axin is a rather nasty product, both oleaginous and waxy, obtained by squeezing the corpses of a Mexican insect that crawls on cacti. And this oily, waxy substance resembles an ointment, which is precisely what it's used for by Mexican peasants, as a soothing
How do you get it
balm.
away from the cactus?
Oh, yes, when it comes out the cactus, it is done to death. And then the ointment that produced from this is used by Mexican peasants as a healing balm or salve.
Oh, well, the injuries they got from the cactus.
I was going to say, yes, it's a risky business, is that. Anyway, but that sort of ointment got from the insects on the cactuses. It's a geometrical figure, and it is an obsolete preposition meaning in face of or in opposition to. Victoria.
Well, Sue and her geometrical term, her nodes. Her 3 curved lines. I don't think it's that. And I just don't think Arthur's accent, preposition. It sounded very nice, but I don't think it's it. I don't like the corpses of Mexican insects one bit either, but it's so horrible that I think it just may be the true one. Yes, I'll go for the ointment made of the corpses of Mexican insects.
It was Michael Jayston who said it. He has to own up now. And there you are. It is an ointment made in just that way. I dare say they wish they could make it some other way, but they can't. That's the way they do it. Manzello is the next word. Victoria Glendinning.
Well, Manzello is a bland, rather yellow-coloured cheese made in Switzerland, near the Italian border, near the Lake Maggiore, which is why it's an Italian-sounding name. And I've never tasted it, because it doesn't travel. The thing about it is it's never exported. And the only thing I can tell you about it is that to mature Manzello, they bury it or sort of hide it for quite a long time in casks in which wine has been made in order to give it a sort of winey flavour. That's Manzello. Unless you've been to that particular area of Switzerland, you probably won't have had it.
Righty-ho. Frank Muir.
Yes, I haven't had it. Manzello is... I don't like it very much. It's... I don't like the noise it produces. It's a musical instrument, Manzello, actually. And it's a lightweight soprano saxophone, which are a bit on the squally side, I find. And it was made popular in America by the late Roland Kirk, who also played no mean alto sax. And also, along with the alto sax, he played clarinet, police whistle, and nose flute.
Oh, I see.
And all at once. Anyway, now who goes next? Timothy, you do.
Yeah, no, seriously though. Manzello is, or was rather, an artificial man-made marble, first produced in London in 1903, made of white cement and plaster of Paris, streaked with artificial pigments. And it was found not to be very durable, but it was very cheap, and examples can still be found in certain Edwardian hotels in the metropolis, particularly in the basements.
So, it's a Swiss cheese, yellow in colour, kind of a saxophone, bogus marble. And Sue Cook makes her choice among those.
Hold on.
Well, it's rather up to her, Arthur, you know. I say, come on, give a girl a chance.
Yes, well, the bland cheese in Switzerland, I think you're trying to make us think of mozzarella. I think you are. Well, maybe you are. And as for Frank's
I was trying to make you think of cello.
Frank's... yes. No, I think you're a bit on the squally side, I find. What twaddle? You've never heard one in your life, I bet. This could be awful, because you probably thought it is. Meanwhile, Timothy's African-made, artificial man-made marble is so completely beyond my comprehension that I think I'll say Timothy, because I've no idea.
The man-made marble of which he spoke to our Bluff.
I'm sure it's Frank. Oh, dear.
No,
so
it isn't marble.
It
isn't marble made of Swiss cheese or anything like that. Who gave the true definition?
Honesty forces me.
It's the saxophone. It's the saxophone.
How
He said it so
embarrassing.
seriously you didn't believe him, but it's true. 3-all, we have twing. And Arthur tells you about it.
Come once more to the potteries of Staffordshire. Last time we were there, you were all terribly rude. But we're there again, because a twing is a 3-legged stand which is put into kilns when they have a very special vase or whatever it may be to, is the technical word fire?
Yes.
And the point of having this twing, this stand, is that the air circulates all round the objet. You smile. All round the objet, rather like modern ovens, I gather. You put a joint in and there's something that keeps it in the middle. Not in my oven. 89 or something. And that's all it is. It's this sort of trestle thing. Do I mean trestle? No.
Kind of brazier.
Prong.
Instead of what you mean.
It's something you put it on. But you seem never...
A little stand.
You seem never to be out of kilns these days, Arthur.
Quite so.
Is it quite healthy, I wonder? All that dry air. Michael, your turn now.
If you'd been a Cumberland farmer many, many years ago, you would have feared a twing as being the cause of deaths among your cattle. A twing is a small, fiery red spider that lurks in long grass, and if swallowed by cattle, licked up and swallowed by them, it was believed to poison the unfortunate animals.
OK.
Well,
rather
put that
sinister.
in short. What have you got down there?
What?
Three-legged red spider.
Do you want to carry on, or do you want to stop there? Let's give Sue her turn.
A lot of bookwork here.
It's her turn now.
Well, a twing is actually, or was actually, a well-sprung early Victorian pram for babies. And it was called that by nannies because the prams were made by a firm called T. Wing and Sons of Hounslow. They're not there anymore, but they used to do a good line in prams in those days. It's quite possible that Queen Victoria, indeed quite probable that Queen Victoria as a baby was perambulated around Kensington Gardens in a twing.
Well, they say it's a pram made by Messrs. T. Wing. It's a small three-legged, I think I had you right in saying, a stand.
A little stand.
Yes, and put it in a kiln. Why not? Let the air go round it. And it's a red spider lurking in the grass, Frank.
Well, we just held up the proceedings with a rather extensive conference here, but we have last hammered it out.
Oh, good.
And we are of one mind over this. What it ain't is Arthur's three-legged stool to let the air blow round a vase, because the air would blow round anything that's put in. I mean, everything is put on something to allow
Don't
the air to get
backpedal,
round.
Frank. Don't backpedal.
No. I'm just trying to make it clear, because some of us need a little more explanation than others. The red spider with cattle that bites cattle and hurls them over its back and they die of disease is a very old, typical bluff on this programme, and we are sorry to see you reviving it. The idea of a pram, the name was T. Wing, is ridiculous. So it's...
Where does that leave
clearly,
you?
and we are in full agreement here, it's the pram. Sue.
Well, it
card,
was Sue who
please.
said it. Was it Messrs. T. Wing's pram?
No, it wasn't. No.
Rubbish. Believe that, you believe anything.
Mustn't
Anyway,
be Arthur.
who knows? Oh, well, let's just wait and
Mustn't be
see
Arthur.
who gave the true definition of twing.
Oh, that's all right.
See?
It's so silly.
I mean, most of the time you're absolutely right. It never is a red spider lurking in the grass. But
Except
just
when it
once in a
is.
way, it is, yeah. And it was then. It's a little red spider, is a twing. And the next word is puckero, or puckero. Frank, I don't know how to pronounce it.
Neither do I.
Goodness
I could be of little
me.
help. Puckero, I would say. Now, I'm not really... This is botanical, incidentally, which isn't my territory. On a clear day with a following wind, I can tell the difference between a parsnip and a buttercup. But beyond that, I don't care to venture. And yet, a puckero is a flower, and I'm here to tell you. And it is, in fact, a variety of orchid, which has got... purpley veins. It's basically white with purpley veins, and rather interesting, apparently, to those who are interested in this sort of thing, scalloped-shaped leaves. And it's called a puckero because it was put together, as it were, as bred in Newport, Connecticut, by an American doctor, and this is the interesting thing, whose name was not Puckero, it was Arnold. Isn't that astonishing?
Yes, it is. It is rather interesting, that, up to a point. Timothy, you're...
Do go on, Frank. You've held us.
Puckero, I think it is puckero because, like bungalow, it is a word borrowed from the Hindu, probably through the Indian Army about 50 years ago or so. It's not a noun, it's a verb. to puckero. I puckero, thou puckerost. He or she puckerost. And it means to grasp or to catch hold of.
Oh, right. I thought you were saying...
Oh.
No. Well-rounded and perfectly complete. Victoria.
Puckero, or puckero, is an Irish dialect word for a old male goat, a rather elderly billy goat. And then it has a secondary meaning. Those of you who know Dublin, in the Henry Street area of Dublin, where the market women are, they would call someone a puckero, where we would say a dirty old man.
Oh, dear. Oh.
I'm sorry.
What an ugly note, dear.
I'm sorry.
Never mind.
So they say that this word means to seize, grab hold of. They say it means a billy goat. And they say that it is a certain sort of orchid. Now, Arthur, make a choice, old son.
Well, now, this elderly goat, oh dear. I don't think it's that.
Don't feel self-conscious about that.
And this Indian word for grasp is so utterly peculiar and extraordinary. And, Frank, you did go on, sir, about your Arnold scalloped orchid.
I do, I know, I do, Arthur.
I know, I'm so often wrong when I say it's poor old Frank, but I think I go for your scalloped orchid.
So, once again, Arthur chooses poor old Frank. Did he choose well?
Poor old Arthur.
Now, very quickly, let's see who gave the true definition, and we'll squeeze the clincher in. There. It's the word to seize. Now, just time, as I say, to fit this one in, sabling. Michael, rather quickly.
A sabling is a greenish-purplish pebble.
That'll do. I'll stop you there, my dear fellow. Sue.
A sable is a small... sabling is a small sable, which is a birthmark on an animal.
Right. And Arthur?
Sabling is an American word for a char, not Mrs. Mop, but a fish.
Right. It's a pebble. It's a fish. It's a sort of birthmark. Now, Timothy.
Whose turn is it, sir?
It's Timothy. Timothy, he must choose. He must home in rather quickly.
It's very difficult. I would go for the fish, Arthur.
You have gone for the fish. Have you gone well, Arthur? True or bluff? Yes! That was really like a rerun of last week, wasn't it? It was 4-all, and then on the you lost it last week, you've lost it again.
Well, anyway. On the post, not at all.
No, but an honourable defeat because it was only by a whisker that Frank Muir's team wins. And let's have a look at the plucky, nay, the sporting losers. There they are. And so there we are. Another trip, I suspect, to the Jurassic layers of the Oxford English Dictionary next time. Until then, goodbye from Michael Jayston, Timothy West, Sue Cook, Victoria Glendinning, Arthur Marshall, and Frank Muir.
Good night.
Goodbye. Hello, Call My Bluff, the middle-class version of Find the Lady, where the bent card always turns out to be Frank Muir.
Good evening. Neither of my guests has played Call My Bluff before, and my first guest is an actress. She is a much-loved actress, and is, if I may so put it, a very English actress. It's Virginia McKenna. I think it's extraordinary that my next guest has not been on the programme in its 17 years of glorious life, but he hasn't. So it's very nice to welcome to it Richard Baker.
And trained to a hair, Arthur Marshall.
Good evening. It's lovely for me to be sitting here flanked by two distinguished players of the game. On my left, the charming Julia McKenzie. And on my right, the admirable Paul Eddington.
Now, I do that and a word appears, or that's the usual form. Sasquatch is the first word. What happens is this. Frank and his two companions define Sasquatch three different ways. Two of the definitions are no good. One's all right, and of course that's the one that Arthur and co try and pick out. So off we go with Sasquatch, Frank.
Sasquatch, Robin.
Oh, thank you.
Sasquatch. The time is the 1920s. The place is New Orleans, or as we say in this country, New Orleans. And in New Orleans, they drink a very remarkable cocktail, which is called a Sasquatch, and it's a cocktail.
You've been drinking again.
Well, I had to try it, didn't I?
Come on.
Which is conspicuous by its absinthe. It's 1 jigger of absinthe and 2 jiggers of bourbon whiskey, bitters, and a little soda water. Sasquatch.
How many jiggers of bourbon? I didn't quite catch.
2. I've got a photocopy of the recipe.
Oh, thank you.
Now it is Richard Baker's turn. There he is.
Well, Sasquatch is a toxic green pigment which is made from rocks, quarried from rocks in South America, particularly in Venezuela. It's toxic because one of the ingredients is arsenic, and it's greenish because another ingredient is copper. It's used to colour paint, and it's also used in insecticides.
Right, now Virginia McKenna.
Well, the Sasquatch could be described as the Canadian version of the Tibetan abominable snowman. Some people who have sighted it say it's over 7 feet tall. It's a very hairy humanoid creature, and occasionally has been seen on the upper slopes of mountains in British Columbia.
So, they say that this Sasquatch is a green pigment, rather poisonous. It's sort of a Canadian version of the Yeti, and it's this cocktail, this early cocktail, Arthur.
Frank, your New Orleans cocktail sounded absolutely disgusting. It also sounded tremendously unreal. So I don't think it can be that. It may be.
No, it isn't.
Your Canadian... Shut up. Your Canadian Yeti, you did it beautifully. And somehow I don't absolutely believe in this. The toxic pigment sounds awfully revolting, but somehow, Richard, I think that it may be your toxic pigment.
You think so? He certainly said it. He has to own up. True or bluff?
Could be my poison.
Oh, no. Now, which of the other two really is Sasquatch
Oh, it isn't your
or
dreadful
Sasquatch?
cocktail. Oh, no,
No, it
it's
isn't. You hovered on the verge of the Canadian Yeti, but then you let it go. But that's what it really is. That's what a Sasquatch really is. So, with a bit of a clunk, we get the next word, pumpkin. And Arthur will tell you all about it.
A pumpkin is an American name for an individual or personalized apple pie. It's very, very, well, not very small. It's just enough for one person. It's made in a pie dish about the size of a large teacup. And to make it more agreeable for children, they sometimes put pastry letters saying Betty, Mary, Tony on the top.
What if their names aren't Betty, Mary, or Tony?
Frank, don't make difficulty.
Well, I'm just trying to...
Try to keep in the spirit of the thing.
Let us see what Paul Eddington now tells us.
Well, this is a word that was coined by Henry James in 1866 in an article in the Atlantic Monthly. And as you might expect, it is a miniature pun, a punkin, rather below par as far as wit is concerned. that's what he called it, a punkin.
Wonder how he told the difference between the genuine pun and the one that was left out. Anyway, no, but that's a question for Frank to answer afterwards in the green room. Julia, your turn.
Yes. If you had the good fortune to visit China, you might come upon a group of men sitting on the floor looking particularly inscrutable and playing a game that is a cross between dominoes and poker. And it's in fact called punkin. And it's played with little ivory tablets, not unlike mahjong. It's quite complicated, and I couldn't go into the details, but it's called punkin.
Well, it's a Chinese gambling game played with little counters. It's a personalised apple pie, which might have Arthur written on it, something of the sort. And it's a very poor pun. So Frank must choose.
No use at all.
We diverge somewhat. Two very close opinions, which don't agree with mine, because I haven't got one.
Well, beginners.
Chinese game, I don't think would sound like that. Punkin. You know, it just doesn't sing. Small apple pie, yes. Yes, it's the small apple pie.
The tiny apple pie of which Arthur spoke.
Arturo.
You are
rather affectingly.
Paying attention to my friend's definition?
He suddenly dove or dived there. Now, he was going to go on and talk about those poor puns, but something stopped him. But let us see who gave the true definition. Was it the poor pun? Was it the Chinese game? Must be one or the other. You had half a mind to go for that, did you, Frank? Or?
Yeah.
No.
Would you have?
Virginia wanted me to.
Well, we must press on with our next word. The score standing 1-1. Agram is the next word, and Richard, it's your go.
Well, it may sound, I don't know, a bit unlikely, but this is about hawks. And it is a peculiar disease of hawks. They are given to developing a nasty blotchy area around their beaks. And if they have it, it's jolly nasty for them and quite worrying for their owners. And you have to do something about it quite quickly. That is agram.
OK. And now it's Virginia's turn.
Agram is a pale white and very sour cherry, which the Romans used for making sauces, especially certain kinds of sauces when they were eating rather fatty food, such as tunny fish. They used to make a tunny fish sauce out of this cherry. And also, it was used as a cosmetic to whiten the skin of beautiful Roman ladies. Agram.
Righty-ho. What does Frank tell us now?
It's an antique adjective, and rather like the other less antique adjectives, like agape, aghast, agog, a Guinness. No. Agape. It's symptomatic of a human reaction, and agram in antiquer times meant disconsolate. It meant a bit sad, a bit disappointed, mouth drawn down, such as you will be if you choose this as the true.
Well. Well, it's a disease not of sheep, but of hawks. It is a cherry, but a very sour one, and it is to be rather glum, rather downcast. And Paul has to choose.
I rather doubt if it's downcast or glum, because it sounds too much like glum. I think that's too... I don't know. No, I don't believe that. I can't think of any better reason than to just say I don't believe it. The Roman sauce, well, both of those explanations I thought were extremely convincing. It's just a question of which one really prefers. I don't fancy that Roman sauce very much. So I think perhaps, although it reminds me of Groucho Marx, who said, I've got Hawk's disease and he's got mine. I think I'll plump for the Hawk's disease.
You plump? Oh, I'm so pleased when a plump is undertaken. But you plumped for Richard Baker's definition. True or bluff? He's got to own up now. Well done, sir. Well done. Sometimes it is a disease of hawks, and it was that time. Agram is certainly that. Now, what we have here is the word stolen, stolon. I don't know how you'd say it. Paul Eddington.
Stolon is a name given for a sucker, not the sort of sucker that is a credulous simpleton, the sort we hope you're all going to be. It is, in fact, a sucker that rises from the base of the stem of some sort of bush or shrub. And there's a definition here that I can't remember. A connecting process of a compound organism, if that helps you at all.
Not much, no.
Now, Julia, what do you say?
Well, a stolon is a long robe worn by ancient Greek women. Now, according to the Oxford Dictionary, which is always good for a laugh, it's the very distinctive dress of an Athenian matron. And by that, I presume they don't mean people who run hospitals in Athens, but women of ripeness and maturity.
Now it is Arthur's turn. Arthur?
Stolon is a very pale, almost colourless Portuguese wine, made from a very pale, almost colourless Portuguese grape, grown in Galicia. It's not drunk much as a table wine, but it's very useful when fortified with brandy as a basis for a sherry, Tio, Pipi, or Pepe.
It must be one or the other, Arthur. Yes. Yes. However, it's this colourless Portuguese wine, they say. It is a sucker growing from a plant, and it is a robe, or was a robe, worn by ladies in ancient Greece. Richard, have a choose.
Yes, well, the vegetable sucker, so eloquently described by Paul, is quite an attractive possibility. And so is the stolon, worn by ripe Greek matrons, and because they both actually sound a bit like the things they describe, so one's tempted by both those descriptions. But I'm inclined to be a bit bold and go for the Portuguese plonk.
Portuguese
stolon.
Wine. Arthur had rather difficulty with the pronunciation. However, was it true or bluff?
Tio Pepe.
So if it wasn't the wine, it has to be one of the others, the robe or the sucker, which... Aha. They own up now.
Oh, dear. No.
There you are. It is. A stolon is indeed exactly what Paul said it was. It's a sucker growing from the side of a plant, stealing the nourishment and all of that. Noosed is the next word, and it's Virginia's turn.
Noosed is a variety of unleavened bread which is baked in a clay oven and is eaten as a kind of a penance by Parsees living in Persia. It is a life-sustaining bread, but it is very tasteless, and so it's really only eaten as a sort of token to their prophet Zoroaster. In fact, it was Zoroaster's main diet.
Poor old Zoroaster.
Yes.
Well, it wouldn't do if he'd got overexcited or anything like that, would it? No, one does understand. Frank, it's your turn.
Imagine, in the very early days, knights, and indeed kings, going into battle on their chargers with their helmet. Now, if somebody gave them a whack with an axe or something, or anything, across the bridge of the nose, what happens? Their eyes water, and they can't see the enemy, and they could fall off their horse, or all sorts of dire things can happen, or the horse can run into a tree. So they had to protect the bridge of the nose. So, somebody unknown, some metalsmith, invented the noosed, which is a vertical lump of iron which comes down from the helmet, protecting the bridge of the nose. Noosed.
You made it live, as usual.
Yes.
Well, now it's Richard, your turn.
Well, it really ought to be spoken with a Scottish accent. It's a noosed, and it's a very unfortunate thing happens in the winter in Scotland when the winds blow fierce and strong, especially on the coast. If you happen to be a Scotsman who owns a rowing boat, because they're obviously in great danger of being swept away by the tide and the wind. And so he builds a little noost for his wee boat on the beach. He makes a little hole in the sand or the shingle or whatever it is, and it's rather like a nest, a little roost, like a roosting hen might sit on. It's a noost for his boat.
So it's this rather flavourless bread, fancied by the prophet. It's part of a helmet, protects you from being hit on the nose too easily, and it's a little hole in the sand where you can put your boat if you're Scots. Julia, you have a choice there.
Well, it's difficult to have a choice because I think we're at a distinct disadvantage on this side. I mean, here we've got Richard who reads the news, so I believe every word he says. Virginia, who looks as though she could never tell a lie in her life.
And me.
And you.
On the other hand.
On the other hand. The Scotsman who nests his boat sounds, I think, a little unlikely. And I'm rather keen on the unleavened bread, but there was so much flack and mime going on there. I tend to think you were hiding the real one, and I'm going to go for Frank's nose protection.
Choosing Frank's nose protection. Well, own up, you old sauce box, you. There. I know there is a bit of metal and it was supposed to protect your nose, but I was just thinking if you hit it hard enough, it would make your nose hurt even more, wouldn't it? However,
it stands away from the nose.
Well, hopefully, as they say these days, hopefully. However, who gave the true definition? We must not linger. Oh, yes. A wee noost is a place where you put your boat, if you've got a mind to. Now, swinny is the next word, and Julia McKenzie will tell you about it.
Well, swinny is a muscular disease in horses' shoulders, to be precise. It's a contraction of the muscles, and it makes them walk very stiffly. And hence the figurative uses of swinny as an adjective, meaning proud or unyielding, arrogant. Swinny.
Let us try Arthur now.
Swinny is an Irish implement, homemade very often, of wood, in a sort of sword-like shape, about sort of 6 feet long. And it is used in primitive districts for flagellating flax, or flagellating hemp, or flagellating anything, to get the unwelcome vegetable matter out of the flax or the hemp.
Rubbish. I'm sorry, not my turn to guess, is it?
Well, you'd certainly have to do it with something. Paul Eddington's go now.
This is an Orcadian word, meaning the rough water just south of the Orkney Islands, the Pentland Firth, between the Orkneys and the mainland. It's where the wind and the tide and everything else conflict, produces mountainous seas, horrible. So that's called swinny. You do, in fact, yourself feel a bit swinny. I've been across it myself, and I know.
Well, it's that rough water, they say, in that part of the world. It's an implement for beating the whatever you don't want out of flax, and it's a disease of horses. Virginia.
Well, I can't quite get this proud walking and stiff shoulder and the horse thing. I can't quite go along with that one, I don't think, and much as the rough seas of the Pentland Firth sound very attractive, I'm not too convinced on that either. I can't help feeling swinny sounds Irish, and sort of the flax and the hemp and the swinny, all seem to go together, so I'll plump for yours.
Ah, she plumped, Arthur, she plumped for you. True or bluff? No. It isn't anything to do with beating flax. It's got to do with something else. Who gave the true definition? One of the other two. They must have it. It is there. Once again, it actually was a disease of horses. 4-2, and we have grivet or grivet. I have no idea. Frank.
Grivet was an instrument used by barbers when they weren't giving troops short back and sides, but were in fact functioning with their other hat on as surgeons. It was rather delicate. little chisel-y thing with the end in a slight V, and they used to use it for nicking the skin in things like bleeding people.
Where did barbers come in?
That's what barbers used to do, sir.
Oh, really?
A little before your time.
Richard Baker's go.
Well, grivet is the way the word should be pronounced. It's a word which has more, in that form, has more usage in England than elsewhere. And it's one of those words that refers to the feel of something. It's a kind of stuff, material, involving silk and also worsted thread. And it was used for the facings of rather elegant coats in the time of Beau Brummel. And grivet was a sort of, slightly roughish but attractive feeling you had if you sort of touched this stuff. Grivet. It's a material.
Right. Now, Virginia.
Well, a grivet must be one of the very few African species of monkey whose colour is predominantly green. It isn't a bright, emerald, gaudy green, but a rather muted, greyish green, which makes a perfect camouflage for this monkey in the sort of jungly areas of Kenya which it lives in.
Right. Well, it's a little instrument they used to use when surgeons were barbers to cup or bleed people. It's a dress material, or the feeling you get from touching it, perhaps both. And, yes, a green monkey, Arthur.
Un petit moment.
You are?
No. Well, we're divided. Never mind. Richard, your silk material, Beau Brummel, grivet, it seems terribly far-fetched. And this poor little green monkey in Kenya, oh dear, I'd love to think it was a little monkey. And I very often say, of course, it's poor old Frank. And sometimes it's poor old Frank, and sometimes it isn't poor old Frank. But poor old Frank, it's you.
You're
with
choosing old
with
Frank
your barber's
again.
instrument.
That's what he said. Old Frank. What about it?
Trouble is that poor old Frank it ain't.
Oh, no. It was one of the other two. Who gave the true definition of grivet or grivet?
Oh, it's the little monkey.
Yes. It's the nice little green monkey springing around from branch to branch. Well, well. Bratchel's the next word. Arthur will tell you.
Bratchel is also known as shepherd's treacle. You may wonder why. Frank.
Oh, it's not nature, is it? I'm not good at nature questions.
Occasionally, poor sheep in flocks get seedy, they get ill, and they need a purgative. And Bratchel is a sort of mixture of chalky water and molasses, which is fed to poor ailing sheep as a sort of drench or purgative or whatever you like.
What has this programme come to? With constipated sheep remedies.
Well, if they weren't ill before, Arthur, they certainly would be afterwards. Or so it seems to me. But this is more than my position is worth. Paul, your go.
A Bratchel it's a visible boundary mark. It's those little metal plates that you see either affixed to the wall or to the pavement or possibly to a milestone, just to delineate the boundary between parishes.
OK. Now it's Julia.
A Bratchel is an Irishman's name for a bonfire. It's a bonfire that is particularly made of flax, flagellated flax, of course. It gives off a great heat and is very rich in linseed oil.
Good. Well, it's a noticeable mark for a parish boundary. It is a bonfire, an Irish bonfire, and it is a purgative for sheep. Frank?
We're a bit worried here. How much time have we got? About 9 minutes.
Just jog along, old soul.
Well,
jog along.
yes, the Irish bonfire is attractive, because it sounds like attractive. I don't know. And I must... The only thing, if your mind's blank, is to choose what you want it to be. And I want it to be Arthur's sheep's medicine.
The purgative of sheep.
I don't think it is, but I want it to.
Arthur, you've been chosen. True or bluff?
The excitement.
Oh.
Let us quickly have the true definition, and we will squeeze in a last word if we move swiftly. There, you see. The Irish bonfire. Irish bonfire with or without flags. Now, very quickly, we'll just get another one in. Pip crake, good enough word. Richard, rather swiftly.
A pip crake are little bits of ice that get forced up through the ground in Scandinavia. It's a Scandinavian word.
I'll hold you there,
Where?
my dear chap. That'll do
What
nicely
am I
for
gonna
us.
say?
Yes, I have a clear picture of it, Virginia.
A pip creek is a bartering session between red Indians and white men in which they exchange animal skins and furs
Lovely.
for copper pots.
I think I will turn aside from you at that point, spellbinding as it was, Frank.
Sussex, it's a homemade yoke to tether cows so that you can milk them and they don't kick you.
Good. That's the way to do it, Squire. That's the way to... It's a cow's hobble. It's a bartering session, and it's a little fragment of ice. Paul, you should then home in on one of those.
Straight away? I mean,
I think so. Straight away.
No Scandinavian word begins with pip. It can't be bartering. It must be from Sussex.
That's the cow's hobble. Frank, true or bluff? Look at the excitement. No, twant the cow's hobble. It was something else. Who gave the true definition? Lo, where it comes. Yes, it's there. It is the little needle of ice. Did you say it was Scandinavian? Or
Yes, it is Scandinavian word.
Yes. Sometimes they evidently do begin with B or K or whatever you said. But there, what a splendid outcome. 5-4. Frank drew back one there. But nonetheless, Arthur's team has won. Let's have a little stare at the plucky losers. There they are. God bless them. More definitions that fell off the back of the OED next time. Till then, goodbye from Richard Baker. Paul Eddington.
Bye.
Virginia McKenna. Julia McKenzie. Frank Muir.
Goodbye.
And Arthur Marshall. Goodbye. Hello again. Call my bluff, and in trap 1, Arthur Marshall.
Good evening. Here we are again with, on my left, triumphant Julia McKenzie. And equally triumphant Paul Eddington.
And busy loading the dice, of course, Frank Muir.
Good evening. Happy to have back again our semi-victorious team. We lost. On my right, Virginia McKenna. And on my left, Richard Baker.
We need a word to begin. There it comes. You do that, and you get the word, and it's quokka. That's the way I'd pronounce it. Arthur and his team will define quokka 3 different ways. 2 of the definitions no good. 1 okay. That's the one that Frank and Co. try and pick out. So off you go with quokka, Arthur.
I'm told that it should really be quokka.
2 Ks and quokka?
So they say.
If you say so.
But never mind.
Right.
It's an unusual type of sledge drawn by a reindeer in Lapland. Why else the reindeer? And the point about it is that it's slightly in the shape of a boat, which the Lapland territory, being what it is, a bit lumpy and uneven, The boat shape helps it to keep upright. Otherwise it might topple over.
It might. Paul Eddington's go.
A quokka is what the Western Australian Aborigines call a small species of kangaroo, small species of wallaby, like a small kangaroo. And rather unusually for marsupials, it's got a short, really rather stumpy tail, a quokka.
OK. Julia McKenzie tells us.
A quokka is Anglo-Malaysian slang for a young terrorist. Apparently in the 1920s, great gangs of quokkas would roam about doing terrible damage to rubber trees for vaguely nationalistic reasons. So a quokka is Anglo-Malaysian slang for a bother boy.
Well, they say then that a quokka or quokka is a terrorist. It's a rather small wallaby, and it's a sledge in Egham. No, not Egham, you didn't say Egham. A sledge in Lapland. Silly of me. What was I thinking of? Frank, have a choice.
Yes. Very good, these. Congratulations. My knowledge of Lapland sledges is a bit fragile. Also, there's the little leaper in Australia, the little wallaby, and the terrorist quokka. I think I'll go for Julia McKenzie and the terrorist for no reason at all.
Really? Well, let's see if you did wisely. Julia, you said it. Own up.
Oh.
True or bluff? You have to tell them.
No.
Now, was it quokka, quokka, or whatever? I don't know.
Oh, no,
the true definition must forthcome. There it is. Very tiny wallaby. Not a big one, just a rather small one. And picky is the only way I can say the next word. Frank, picky?
Picky is lovely. A picky is a type of whistle blown by pygmies, male pygmies, of the Mbuti tribe in Africa. It's a wooden...
Sounds like a whistle indeed,
whistle.
Arthur.
I'm sorry, what?
No, it was just the way Arthur laughed. I thought he was giving a demonstration of the... I shouldn't have said a word.
No, it does whistle a bit when he laughs. It's a wooden whistle, and it's about the size of a referee's whistle. But the Mbuti pygmies don't summon and show a card. They blow their whistle in order to summon up benevolent spirits from the jungle. What do you mean?
Why not?
Well done. You're dribbling, Frank.
Well, peaky is a very, very nasty business. It's a disease that the natives in Papua New Guinea used to have very badly. It's slightly better now than it was. And because it's a species of wild pig that runs around there, and it's apt to have a very virulent disease. And if you eat the meat thereof, you get peaky, and it is a socially unacceptable disease. And it's no relationship, I don't think, to the word peaky, but you certainly feel it if you've got it.
Yes. And you probably look it too. Virginia.
A picky is a game bag which is carried for hunting purposes by South American Indians. It's don't laugh, please. It's in the shape, actually, of a knapsack with two straps that go over the shoulder like this, which leaves both hands absolutely free to support a blowpipe or to shoot a bow and arrow.
Yeah, well, you're doing the pygmy's whistle again, Arthur. Anyway, it's a pygmy's whistle, and I dare say it sounds much like the way Arthur was just doing it there. It's unfortunately also gastroenteritis or thereabouts, and it's a game bag. So, Arthur.
I can't believe in this. Was it the Mbuti tribe?
Mbuti.
I can't believe in the Mbuti's pygmies with wooden whistle. I really can't. Richard's Papuan disease. Oh dear, unacceptable social disease. Sounded perfectly horrible. As always, I believe every word that Virginia says, dear. It smiles out of you. So I'm going for your game bag stuffed with blowpipes.
She didn't quite say. She said you could do blowpipes while wearing the game bag. But I don't think it alters the principle. True or bluff, Virginia? No. Nothing. So who gave the true definition? Was it the disease or the pygmy's little tiny whistle? Well, it would have to be a small one.
Arthur gets the yellow card.
Peaky Peaky is indeed a pygmy's whistle for whistling up kindly spirits in the jungle. Stropper is the next word, and Paul Eddington will tell you.
A stropper is a naval term meaning the spine, the very strong wire that holds up an awning. More particularly, the triangular awning, the sort that they sling over, what's it called, the quarterdeck, I think, on very sunny days, to provide a little shade. That's a stropper.
OK. And after that, we asked Julia McKenzie.
A stropper. Again, a slang word, but this time early Victorian. It's a slang word for the lucifer match. In fact, the strip of wood with the phosphorus, which, when struck on sandpaper, will ignite. And a little bit of useless information to give you. In Cockney East End, a vendor of the lucifer match was called a stropper dobber.
Oh, colourful talk, yes, indeed. Arthur?
Stropper is a local dialect word amongst dairy farmers in Lincolnshire. And it's used for a cow that is really not giving of her best. She's slacking. Her milk yield is well below average. And they call these poor creatures stroppers. And you may care to know that in 1707, in a Lincolnshire market, a stropper was sold for as little as threepence halfpenny.
Then, they say that it's a brace to hold up this awning on the ship wherever it goes up. Quarterdeck, I think Paul said, yes. It's a match, and it's a cow that isn't yielding very well. Richard?
Well, a slack cow, all that detail about Lincolnshire and so on, I'm very suspicious of, I'm sorry to say. Quite sceptical about that. And this funny Victorian match, I'm very tempted by Julia, as who would not be, to believe what she says. But I'm also tempted by the stropper, because I know that in the Navy you talk about people being stroppy if they're damn difficult and things like that. And strops are certainly wires. It's a bit obvious, tricky. I'm going to go for Paul's.
Paul, yes, he did say it was the awning, the brace for the awning. True or bluff, Paul? Own up.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. Oh, no. And you, an old salt.
Well, there you are, you see.
Heavens to Betsy. No, well, it wasn't
I'm still at sea, obviously.
Yes. They sold you there. But who gave the true definition?
Mocked.
Here's a cow which doesn't yield very much, whether in Lincolnshire or elsewhere, I know not.
Classic bluff, that, isn't it?
Classic. Staines Hall is the next one. Richard Baker.
Well, the word Stainshaw is an interesting one. It's one of those words which derives from a place name, really, the place where it first appeared. A Stainshaw is the kind of pond that you make in your garden by just digging out a stream and just making it wider and bigger so that it forms a pond and the water continues to flow through it. And it got its name because a very early example of this was at Stainshaw Manor near Oswestry in Shropshire. So that's a Stainshaw.
Right enough. Now, Virginia.
Well, a Stainshaw is an absolutely vital piece of equipment if you're a painter in oils particularly, because it's a tin receptacle. Any old tin will do, really, cocoa or Ovaltine or anything like that. And you fill it, the painter fills it with turpentine, and he puts his brushes into this tin, this Stainshaw, and so they remain nice and soft for the next day when he wants to use them.
OK, and now it's Frank Muir's turn. There he goes.
Stainshell. Stainshell is a kind of worsted Norfolk cloth, which is hairy, hirsute, and at the same time hispid.
Oh, bravo.
Not bad.
Lovely.
It's hairy and it's also sort of bristly. It's fairly unpleasant stuff. And you think, well, what will you make with stuff which is hairy and bristly? You make blankets from it. Now, what do you do with the blankets is a very difficult question. I suggest blankets for the spare bedroom when people you don't particularly like are coming. Or if you know a penitent, you could run him up a vest of it. But apart from that, I don't really see much point to it. Stainshell.
Well, it's this hairy cloth that, who knows, may not have caught on very well. It's a brush holder for painters, and it's the sort of pond you have if you dig out a bit of a stream. So, Paul, you may choose.
Well, if I get this wrong, I shall be carpeted on a piece of Stainshell, probably. Perhaps it won't be a piece of Stainshell after all, because I'm not really awfully convinced by this piece of worsted. It sounds awfully nice, and yes, I have a feeling I've probably dug in, even perhaps bathed in a Stainshell of my own construction in the country, blocking up a stream and making a pond, a sort of Stainshell, if that's what it is. But I rather think that it's more likely to be the painting tin. I'd like Virginia to be telling the truth for once.
Could she do otherwise? If she could do otherwise, we shall now learn, possibly. True or bluff? No, she could not. No, she could not. But who knows? Later on, she may turn to fibbing. You just don't know. You can never really tell. Kolaki or Kolachi? I really don't know. Julia?
Kolachi is a greyish fur that is made from the skins of the Caucasian stoat. No, titter ye may.
I'm sorry about that, love.
But you will have seen Kolachi because it is frequently used around the boots of Cossack officers as they gallop along in Anna Karenina and films like that. You will have seen.
Got to come from somewhere, I do agree.
Well,
yes.
That's it. That's Kolachi. Grey fur.
Splendid. Right, now, what does Arthur tell us?
I don't know how many Czechoslovakian ladies you know. But if you know any, you may have noticed they rather tend to run to, I don't say fat, plumpness. And the reason may well be because they have been tucking in to too many kolachis. Because a kolachi is a very, very rich and fattening fruit pie, absolutely jammed with every kind of fruit and thing that you could think of, and doubtless topped with whipped cream. Where do they eat it, you ask? At lunch? Not at all. At dinner? No. At tea time. The ladies pass it round from lap to lap and munch it up.
Splendid. Splendid. Paul Eddington, go.
Kolachi. It's a sort of seaweed that grows around the Gulf of Bothnia, in the Baltic. Grows very plentifully during the summer season and is gathered by the people who live around those shores and used sometimes as a sort of insulation on their roofs, sometimes, I believe, as a sort of fertilizer. Kolachi.
Right. Well, they say that it is seaweed, fruit pie, and Caucasian stoat fur. It's just the precision of the Caucasian, you know, that's all. Virginia, choose.
It's very difficult because all very foreign, and I'm just going to have to choose the one that I like the sound of best, I think. I don't think it's the grey fur around the boots. I don't know why I don't, and I don't really know why I don't think it's the seaweed, because it probably is that. I think it's that lovely pie that the ladies are passing from lap to lap. Could I try that?
Arthur did speak rather gluttonously of it,
Yes,
did he not?
gluttonously.
True or bluff?
You dwelt,
I
I thought.
He did rather.
Dribble.
Oh, Yes, there was something of yourself in it, Arthur, when you said it. I think you've eaten one, sir. I think you have.
Arthur's been passed from lap to lap.
Well, but a kolache or kolache or kolache is indeed an individual fruit pie. Rurp seems to follow on the pie as the night the day, but I don't really mean that. Rurp, Virginia.
No, rurp is nothing to do with pies. A rurp is a word used in the American building trade. It is actually a house brick made of sand baked under pressure with a proportion of slaked lime added to it. These bricks, we are told, weigh only about 2/3 of the weight of an ordinary clay brick, which is greatly to their advantage. And a second advantage is that they don't harbour lichen and other parasitic plants in the same way that ordinary clay bricks do, so they're indeed very useful.
All right, now, who shall we have? Yes, Frank Muir.
Rurp. Rurp is what a mountaineer needs to stop himself falling off the mountain. Rurp.
What accent?
Why are you doing that? How does the accent fit in?
A kind of amusing introduction.
I see, of course.
To get you puzzled.
Yes.
Actually, to stop mountaineers falling off mountains, they have things called piton. And a piton is like a sort of flat nail with a hole in it. And you bash those into the mountain and then thread the rope through. And then when they fall, they only fall a little way, you see. And a rurp, there are several lengths of piton, as you can imagine. And when the crevasse gets smaller and smaller, you need a tiny, tiny little piton. And when you've got a tiny, tiny little piton, which you drive into these small cracks, it's called a rurp. And you thread your rope through the rurp. That's why I said rurp in the first place. I wish I hadn't started this.
Very good. Richard's go now.
Well, rurp is a nasty word, and it's usually pronounced rurp by chaps in the city. They have a lot of private words in the city when they get together and chat among themselves, and a rurp is a pretty nasty business. It's what a bankrupt has been known to do from time to time. If he's in trouble, he takes over a company that's going strong, and he uses its credit rating in order to keep himself in business. That's a rurp.
So, it's evidently a sort of fraud, it is plainly a sort of brick, and it is equally clearly a kind of tiny little piton. Julia, would you like to choose?
Hang on.
Oh,
certainly.
We're in confab.
Right.
Do sort of longers.
I think someone should... Yes.
They're rather enjoyable.
Play that
really,
pygmy's whistle, will you? Thank you.
Oh, it's all so preposterous. And these tiny pitons with the rope going through the rope. I mean, it's rubbish.
Only a game.
Well, can I just hold that in abeyance?
Of course.
Thank you.
Suspend yourself from it.
Thank you very much. Virginia, this light Yankee brick that I suppose it's quite feasible. I mean, there's lots of skyscrapers and you would think they would use lighter bricks, but when you open your eyes wide like that, I tend to think you're trying to make me believe you. So I'm not going to believe you. And these city gents who are bankrupt, is that... No. Well, Arthur said it sounds... Arthur said that was the most boring of the lot, and that would probably be correct. Yes, I'm going to choose the one I want it to be, and I want it to be the tiny piton.
Oh, Frank. Well done.
Did he tell the truth, Frank? Were you teasing them again?
Thank you.
Of course not. He tried to bore you into submission, but he couldn't succeed. It was actually true. So there, a rurp is that tiny piton.
Oh, come on, chap.
4-2, by George. Gurgeons is the way I'd say the next word. Arthur?
Gurgeons, strangely enough, has no singular. And it's a poetic word, meaning evil smells or noxious vapours. And Frank, you being
How can you be poetic about noxious vapours?
I am coming to it in a moment. I'm
sorry,
about
sir.
to quote Milton.
Ah.
Oh, yes, he dispelled
And you
noxious
being...
vapours.
What? You being a literateur had doubtless read Book 1 of Paradise Lost.
Never.
In which the lines appear, and I have to get this right, a furnace horrible, he's speaking of hell, a furnace horrible on all sides round, fumed with the gurgeons of pestilent decay.
Get away.
I think he was on automatic pilot that day, Arthur, wasn't he? I don't know.
Maybe.
But of course, it's a very long book, and you can't expect the best all the time. Whose turn is it now?
Nasty smells, in other words.
Yes.
I think Milton is very ironic.
Someone had to say it. Someone had to say it. Let us ask Paul now what he says.
Gurgeons is an heraldic term, meaning a device representing a whirlpool, two small spiral bands of colour. Invariably in heraldry, either azure or argent.
Write it up.
Something in heraldry.
Yes, it's a device representing a
Heraldic
whirlpool.
device. Yes. Note it down. Take notes, Julia.
Right, carry on.
Thank you.
Next.
Gurgeons is a word from the private language of millers, and probably the only private word we can deal with on this programme, I should think.
Millers.
From millers, yes. They say, oh, gurgeons, you see. And it is, in fact, the... it's
Dr.
the
Jonathan and Mrs. Miller.
Give the girl a chance. Look at her. Press
It's
on.
the coarse refuse of wholemeal flour. It's a bran-like substance which makes brown bread brown and is very rich in nutrition and roughage.
All right. Nothing wrong with that. Private language or none. It's sort of a bran, you know, the coarse leavings after the stuff has been ground. And heraldic charge, device, evil smells. Frank?
This one is so pathetically simple. I mean, it's all one can do to bring oneself even to discuss it. God. It's
Force yourself, Buster. Come
it's
along.
very good word, gurgeons. You've got three good definitions there. Evil smells is very unlikely, isn't it? Gurgeons, golly. And, yes, the heraldic devices are terribly easy, aren't they? You can say any old word and call it a heraldic device, because none of us knows any of them except argent and whatnot. Yes, and madam. Oh dear.
You're treading water, I'd say.
With total confidence, at 2-4, I say it's Arthur and his Milton. You don't act, Arthur, just...
No, yes, he does look as though he's doing...
But I did it too well.
Was it true,
That
Arthur?
lovely quotation.
Yes.
I think he just nudged you off your line there. I could see it coming that you were just a touch defensive. But who gave the true definition of gurgeons?
Here's a little private
Ah,
word.
yes. Just means bran. That's all it means. 5-2. My goodness. Jowpie or Jopie is the next one, Frank?
Joppy, probably. Just to be different. No idea. It's not very important to us, but it's terribly important if you're a medieval mason building a cathedral or something, because if you're going to support a roof on an outside wall, the roof comes down, you know, and the wall is there. And the roof might sort of work away at the wall and nudge it, but you put a joppy or a jowpie or a jawpie, which is a long run of stone on top of the wall, which is to hold the roof of the Gothic building.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yes, well, he mimed that one. Very good, too. Richard?
Well, it's certainly pronounced joppy in the West Country. And that somehow describes what the chap does, because he was, in fact, a kind of tinker that used to go around on a horse, jopping along, you know, on the summer afternoons, and other afternoons too, I dare say. And he used to do odd jobs. I mean, he used to mend plumbing and things that went wrong in the house and that sort of thing. And sold old things as well. A joppy. He was a sort of tinker.
OK. Right. Virginia.
a jalopy is a flat, hand-propelled trolley. It was lined with straw by fruit pickers in Worcestershire, and they put they put onto this straw fruit that got very, very easily damaged, like plums or peaches and fruit like that, so that it would be protected on the straw.
I can explain Arthur's titter. It's just that, the mention of any county whatever make old hands laugh on this programme. I really don't know why. Anyway, so it's that sort of fruit trolley, Worcestershire. It's a stone ridge that does sterling work when it comes to cathedrals, and it's a tinker. West Country one, though. Arthur?
I can't believe it's Frank's sort of flying buttress thing.
Well, that's the difference between us, isn't it? you don't have courage and faith.
And Virginia's Worcestershire fruit trolley, oh dear, it could well be that. And every word you say one believes. On the whole, I think it's Richard's West Country general mobile handyman or tinker or whatever.
Well, he's nodding as though he approves your choice. I wonder why. True or bluff, Richard? Oh, now I know. No, he was only pulling a leg. Who gave the true definition?
Can we have another 3 words quickly?
No, well, there it is. That jawpy, pronounce it as you will, is that stone ridge that would hold up and do successfully for a roof, cathedral, or otherwise in medieval times. However, we have come to the end of our time, and the score standing at 5-3. Yes, distinctly, Arthur's team has won. And spare a glance at the losers, who I hope are still as sporting as they've ever been. Oh dear, the winners were actually clapping them. Patronage can go no further. Well, anyway, we'll have some more lead halfpennies from the Oxford English Dictionary next time. Till then, goodbye from Paul Eddington, Richard Baker, Julia McKenzie, Virginia McKenna, Arthur Marshall, and Frank Muir. Goodbye. Call my bluff again, where the fanciest fibs come from Frank Muir.
Both my guests are new to the programme, which is always good fun. My first writes a column, and she writes a column in the Observer Sunday colour supplement, and it's the one I turn to first, along with about 500,000 others, in which she has a nice little picture of herself peering over her half glasses. I hope you're going to put them on later.
Yes, I am.
Oh, good. It's Sue Arnold.
Hello.
And my next is an actor whose face you know extremely well. He's temporarily retired from the civil service and is going in for the helmet and spear game at the Royal Shakespeare Company. Nigel Hawthorne.
And in the peak of condition, Arthur Marshall.
Good evening. Delighted to welcome back to Call My Bluff, who she was on the other team last time, but now she's with me, the beautiful and talented Liza Goddard. And on my right, somebody who spends his life introducing people, but who himself needs no introduction, Russell Harty.
The old bell still works, and it produces the first word, Cockygee is the way I pronounce it, but we'll learn about that later on. Frank and his team will define Cockygee 3 different ways. 2 of them no good, 1's all right, and that's what the other people, Arthur's team, go after. So off you pop, Frank. Cockygee.
A Cockygee is the Australian gold miner's equivalent of a Cornish pixie. Would that be enough? Or,
no, press on.
One more.
You're in Ballarat, you see. You're in Ballarat digging for gold. And you find... you did find a little curious spiral-shaped fossilised sea snail. And that was called a Cockygee. And for some reason that I can't substantiate at this moment, the Australian miners thought, wisely or unwisely, that where they found these, they would also find gold.
So now let's try Nigel Hawthorne.
This Cockygee is the name of a regional game played with sheep's knuckle bones. Rather cube-shaped bones in the ankle joints of the sheep has been used for centuries as a form of dice. And in fact, in Roman times, which probably a little before most of us were born, it was called there, locally, ludus taylorum.
Right. And now, Sue Arnold.
A Cockygee is actually a form of it's a variety of Irish apple, grown both sides of the border. It's a rather horrid colour. It's pallid and sickly looking and green, but in fact it's delicious. And it's an interesting and well-known historical fact that before 1835, when a certain stout became available in Ireland, allegedly good for you, cider made from Cockygee apples was available in most pubs, adjacent bars in Ireland.
They say then that it's a kind of a game played with sheep's bones, sort of mumblety-peg, that kind of thing. It's a promising fossil, promising if you're looking for gold, because if it's there you may get the gold, and it's an Irish apple. So, Arthur, have your pick?
Hang on.
Certainly. I'll rein myself in.
Well, now, there's 3 tremendously interesting definitions.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Beautifully delivered, all of them quite fascinating. And 2 are total rubbish, and we have to pick them out. Now then.
You're playing for time.
Frank, I didn't. You did it so well, but your Australian pixie, helpful with gold, I couldn't quite see that.
It was a bit unconvincing, wasn't it? I must admit.
Well, it was at the time.
Could I do another one?
No, sir. And this knucklebone game, it seemed awfully vague as to where it was all going on, somehow. Coming from Devon myself, of course, I'm passionately fond both of apples and of cider and everything to do with them. And I dare say that the Irish Cockygees are perfectly delicious. Not golden delicious, but Irish delicious. And I'm going to go for Sue's Irish apple.
That's what she said. True or bluff? Perfectly true. It is indeed an apple,
Just
an Irish apple, said to
fluke.
be perfectly delicious. Murrett's the next word, and Arthur, off you go.
Well, now, this is of great interest to those of you who like wholemeal bread.
No, it's got bits in it, no.
Well, I'm coming to this, because murret is a sort of microscopic fungus that grows upon millstones.
Oh, I'm even less fond of it.
Unless the millstones are constantly scrubbed clean. Now, you may be anxious about murret and wonder if your bread has got murret in it. Don't be worried, because the murret itself is not poisonous, but the miller is not the only person alive in the mill. There are also little things that creep upon the ground, cockroaches. And murret is the absolutely tip-top food of cockroaches. And so the millstones have to be rubbed clean, otherwise you get cockroaches ground into the flour.
Those are the lumps.
I was coming to it. Not to everybody's taste, a dead cockroach in your wholemeal bread.
In the old days, Arthur, that would have got an H certificate, that definition.
Can we move on?
Certainly, with all dispatch to Russell Harty.
Mine is much simpler. A murret is a highly and richly ornamented pleasure craft that plies up and down the Ganges once or twice, to ply up and down the Ganges, and is propelled by gentlemen who speak in Urdu and shout at boats that go past. And if you saw or feel that you've seen the film of Gandhi, you may have caught sight of a murret going up and down, and a man shouts, "What time does the last murret go to Benares?"
If you feel it, yes, I like that, Russell. Very good. Liza Goddard now.
Well, murret is actually a reddish, tawny brown colour, the sort of colour of an old 10-shilling note. And it's most particularly the colour of a breed of sheep native to the Shetland Islands. And a sheep whose murret-coloured wool, undyed, is the dominant hue of many a hand-knitted Shetland sweater.
Well, it would be, yes. It would be if the sheep were coloured brown. That's what it is, brown in colour. Sort of fungus on a mill wheel, scrub it hard, and a pleasure craft up and down the Ganges elsewhere. Frank, you to choose.
I'm tremendously alarmed about this fungus feeding these giant cockroaches. So many people go to health food shops and eat this muck, which looks like sweepings from a stable for breakfast, and to think that there's even a danger of getting a cockroach leg.
I wouldn't have upset the public for the word.
Well, no, I don't hold with that sort of goings on in the millers. Pleasurecraft it can't be. Shetland sheep is very encouraging, so I'll choose pleasurecraft.
Excessively dismissive and rather offensive by dismissing it so lightly.
It was loving, really, wasn't it?
It was Russell who said that. Now, own up, Russell. You have it there somewhere. Nothing to do with pleasurecraft. Something else. Who gave the true definition of good old murret? It was the sheep.
My team thought it was the sheep, but I knew worse.
Yes.
Would have his way.
It's actually the colour rather than the sheep, but I dare say the one is transferred to the other. Dwam is the way I'd say it, my simple way. Nigel.
Yes, dwam is a part of the wheel of a gun carriage, the sort of thing that you might see at the Royal Tournament in Earl's Court. It's the removable metal bolt which fastens the hub of the wheel to the axle and therefore enables the wheel to be easily removed.
Splendidly deft and practical. Yes, now Sue.
Dwam is an adjective they use in Wiltshire quite often. It actually means, well, if you used it about food, it would mean stodgy, lumpen, indigestible, like suet pudding. And if you use it of people, it means stupid, thick, beef-witted, I think. And Cobbett, noting in his Rural Rides, said that the average citizen of Marlborough was said to be as dwam as a wooden dumpling.
Good. Well, let's hear now what Frank says.
Don't go to Marlborough. Dwam is in fact pronounced dwam, not dwam. Dwam it is. And it's a Scottish loss of consciousness. It's a north of the border faint. It's You will recall the lines from.
Not Walter
Let me
Scott.
guess.
Robert Nichol.
You put the heart across me.
A less well-known bard than a rabbi, but nevertheless a bard. And Robert Nichol wrote, and I quote, with astonishing accuracy,